We begin with our first one-on-one session. It's our pleasure to have Mr. Damodar Prasad Goyal. He's the president of the Society for Unaided Private Schools of Rajasthan. Under his leadership, the society challenged Section 12(1)(c) of the RT Act 2009, which mandated that all private schools reserve 25% capacity in elementary school, which is primary school, class 1 to 8 for poor children, and provide them free of charge education with partial reimbursement from state governments. The society's writ petition was partially upheld by the Supreme Court. Goyal is also management consultant to a large number of private schools across the country. We're going to discuss I'm going to keep it a surprise. I'm going to leave you two and Mr. Goyal to tell you what this nationally important issue, which has wide ramifications for India's private schools. Mr. Goyal, you're welcome, please.
So, welcome, sir. When a few weeks ago you rang me up and told me that a very important judgment relating to private school fees regulation and fees administration has been passed by the Supreme Court, which is not well reported in the media at all. So, can you tell us which is this very important judgment? Basically, what does it say and what are its implications?
So, on 19th October, the Supreme Court, on 19th October, the Supreme Court passed two judgments in relation to the charity exemption from income tax for the charitable activities. So the basic thing is that education is being considered as a charitable activity. In no case it is considered as a commercial activity. So the Supreme Court has now dealt with the few cases that how and on what parameters activity of education and general public utility will be considered as charitable activity. And these two judgments will have a far-reaching implications, which nobody has noticed. Even with all due respect to my chartered accountant friends and the advocates, they have not been able to go through the entire judgment and they have not been able to inform their clients that what are the implications and how it will make difficult for the schools to run in future.
Sit down.
Now, the most important thing, the most important aspect of these two judgments are, number one, that trust or the society or a company incorporated under Section 8 of the Companies Act are meant only for charitable activities that is solely for education. Now earlier the word solely was interpreted as predominantly. It means you could have engaged into some kind of other activities along with the education. Now the Supreme Court has very clearly held that it should be solely for educational purpose. Now what is solely for educational purpose? The education purpose is to impart education from pre-primary to the professional level, which is recognized by some affiliating body or body incorporated by the law. So these kind of things are there, that the activities conducted by the school colleges will be considered as education activity. Number two, now they have interpreted that only 4 ancillary activities are permitted. What are these? Number one, sale of books, sale of uniform, canteen and transport to your students.
No, 1 minute, sir. In the light of this, what happens to the TMA Pi judgment?
That is what
it says you are allowed to make a reasonable profit.
Yes.
You are allowed to plow it back.
Yes.
It's also, education is a vocation. It's a legitimate vocation just like any other.
Yeah. So actually the Supreme Court has taken the paragraph from the TMA Pi which says the TMA Pi has made the biggest damage to the educational world.
It has damage.
Yes, it has done it. Many pronouncements it has given some relaxation about the autonomy
Yes.
But it has categorically said that education per se is an activity charitable. So now the reasonable surplus, now the Supreme Court judgment has also allowed reasonable surplus. But the caveat which they have put it, that it should be cost plus marginal markup. Now the biggest question which should bother every one of us, that how the cost will be calculated. Whether capital expenditure will be included in our cost calculation, whether the payment to the non-teaching staff as per our choice will be considered as cost, whether taking services from our hands, arm length companies will be considered as this cost or not. The marginal markup which Dilip ji is telling, again the TMA pie doesn't say about what is the reasonable markup, what is the reasonable profit. But in Islamic Academy, in the minority judgment, Justice S.B. Sinha has defined that there can be reasonable surplus can be ranged in between 6 to 15%. And section 11 also says that an institution can generate profit or surplus up to 15%. 85% you have to apply for the purpose of your organization or the society. It means anything above 15% will be non-reasonable markup. So that is the one thing which is alarming. Number two,
but hasn't the Supreme Court actually, by doing all this hair splitting and all that, and muddied the waters, in that it's now become very, very difficult and is likely to dry up investment into school and private education.
Again, Dilip ji, we should see what is being written in the wall. NEP at 4 places has categorically stated.
That's a national education policy.
National education policy. That education is a philanthropic activity. It has to be transparent. No profit motive should be involved, and malpractices will be checked. So now we should be aware and we should be conscious, and we have to reframe our working. We have to redo our working. We have to relook at our documentation, that how we can comply with law. It is very important.
But at the same time, the government policy, I just learned last week that Harrow College is coming to India, okay? And their fees are going to be 19 lakhs a year. So how, now there seems to be a total contradiction in government policy and Supreme Court hair splitting. Where are we going to end up? In China, you are allowed to run education as a profitable activity. We are more communist than the Chinese. How is that?
Dilipji, the fact is that what is allowed in the China and what is not allowed, that China had just closed all edutech companies by the one stroke of the pen. China has a different kind of working. They work on the basis of the having more funds from the foreign. In India, our government works on the vote-catching politics. So that's the major difference. Now the thing is that how and what we should do. Number one, we should all relook at our documents. All of us, we should include everything possibly which is connected with the education and general public utility in our memorandum of association. It should fall within our objectives. If you are conducting any activity which is not included in your objective clause of your constitution, whether it is registered in society, trust or the Companies Act, please amend your memorandum of association and bylaws. This is very important. Number two,
amend it to include all education, all activities which have any connection with education.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes. Okay. Now, you cannot conduct any activity. You cannot rent out your sports field. You cannot have carnivals for other. You cannot have sports activities, where your own students are not involved. If you are conducting for the others, then it will be considered as a commercial activity.
Even if you are not taking a fee?
No, without fee, if you are doing it for charity,
oh, then that's okay.
Then you are all right. But if you are charging the fee and making the profit, then it is not permissible. So this is also very important. And another most important thing is, which is bothering everybody of us, that how the cost will be calculated. Because as on today, as per best knowledge of mine, as I have been able to see the balance sheets and financial accounts of hundreds of the institutions, whether the capital expenditure which we are spending on creating infrastructure or creating a new school from the earning of the one school, that will become difficult. That will really become difficult. Now you have to spend the money on the very same activity of the school. So for that, what is the way out?
No, are you saying that if you have a chain of schools, you can't transfer a profit made from one school to start a new school? Is that what you're saying?
That is what, because you are not here, the Supreme Court intention is that it is the application of the fund. You cannot charge the fee from one student of this year to create another school. That is what the intention of the Supreme Court judgment is, and which is very grey area, which is alarming me. Believe me, after 19th October, I have been able to speak to the about 10 to 15 top chartered accountants. They are not clear about all these things, and they have not informed to their clients, schools, or anybody that what kind of changes they should make. And on any point. Now,
so are you suggesting that the Supreme Court verdict or the judgment is actually, it requires a review, because it sounds to me very confusing?
Dilipji, my experience in dealing with the cases in Supreme Court, review is just an eyewash. Until and unless it is not referred back to a larger bench and there is a curative petition, the purpose will not be served. The best way is, and which I don't believe that we will be able to have because we don't have the unity.
We don't have the?
Unity. Our associations, FICCI or other organizations, we have already made a representation to the Government of India that please explain, please issue some guidelines that what components should be considered as a cost of education. And the another thing which nobody has noticed, that in the Finance Bill 2022, there was a major amendment that if you are paying any excess amount to the promoter or the person connected with the society, then it will be 100% taxed. 100% tax. And number two, earlier we were allowed to use our surplus above 15% for the next 5 years. But now it has been reduced to the 4 years. And if you don't use that surplus within the 4 years, it will be taxed in 5th year. And the another thing is that whatever the surplus you have over and above 15%, that has to be kept in a separate bank account. And you have to spend from that separate bank account. So these small issues has to be addressed. Otherwise, you know, the fight with the law is a very difficult task. And the government or the government officials and politicians are not very considerate to private schools. They feel that we are in a wrong business and we are doing something wrong, whereas they will always queue in front of us, pleading that your school is the best school, please give admission to my son, grandson and all these things. But that is something different. But when they will be in chair, they will not leave any occasion when they can just tight your nose. So these are the most important things which we should be very careful.
Yes, so the conclusion one arrives at actually that bias which against private education, which came in the 1970s when those convenient judges were appointed by Mrs. Gandhi, continues in the Supreme Court. Would that be correct to say?
No, actually, I will take a minute, another minute. to tell you the background of this one. CAG made audit of the income tax department.
CAG is that Controller and Auditor General.
Okay. Which is the constitutional body. They made the this audit of the income tax department, where they have found that income tax department is very lenient to the education institutions and charitable institutions. They have categorically stated in their report, which has been presented to the parliament, and no parliament can afford to ignore the report of the CAG. You know what happened to the 2G scam and coal scam, and it was all byproduct of the CAG report. So CAG report is very important. In CAG report, they have said that the assessments are being made ignoring so many legal positions. They are not considering that whether the charitable institutions are doing really charity or not. And they have further said that there is a very, very nominal scrutiny and searchage on the charitable institutions. So,
charitable education institutions.
Charitable education or other activities like hospitals, dharamshalas, or whatever charitable activity you are doing. So, believe me that in the next financial year, more cases will be scrutinized, there may be more raids, more searches, more seizures in private schools. So, please clean up your docks, please clean everything, do everything what best possible you can do, and try to fall in law, in the framework of the law. Now, it will be very difficult to ignore any provision of the law, and when this is the law pronounced by the Supreme Court, it is very, very difficult for any government to pass any relaxation or issue new guidelines contrary to the judgment of the Supreme Court.
Well, see, the whole point is that it's well established that 48% of all children in school education go to private schools. This is not well known. Everyone thinks it's 5 and 10%. That's incorrect. The Central Square Foundation has found that 48% and India's entire middle class has been educated in private education institutions. Even now, budget private schools educate the lower middle class and aspirational working class families. So all this that's happening in the Supreme Court, I think it's a lot of hair splitting is going on, and we need to speak up. At least EducationWorld is going to speak up. This is like an oppression of private education, which has a very important role to play in the education continuum. Now, of course, the laws of contempt and all are there, but you're allowed to make a reasonable criticism of Supreme Court judgments. I think this is very wrong. I think the government policy, Supreme Court policy should be raise the standard of government schools to private school regulation. Don't try and pull down private schools. Everywhere in the world, including China, Southeast Asia, everything, private education is in fact flourishing. It's being encouraged. And these kind of judgments are so complex. Even I'm a lawyer, I'm a qualified lawyer, I find it very difficult to understand these judgments. How will education leaders and others, like you say, do your document? As it is, there's too much documentation in income tax and all that for citizens. When you say, etc., there's going to be a lot of litigation now, isn't there?
Yeah, Dilip, I think we're going to take some 1 or 2 questions from the floor now, and we'll wind up this session. Any questions? We have time for 2 questions. Yeah. Yes, sir. Just get a mic to him, please.
Mr. Goyal, questions actually. First is...
Introduce yourself, please.
My name is Robin Agarwal.
All right.
I'm director at Learning Path School, Mohali.
Okay, from Mohali. Okay.
First is, this judgment came section 23C. Most are registered under section... You're asking to
you have to keep your mic closer to you, Robin. We can't hear you. Thank you.
So, what you say is that have to re-register our trust under a different MOA now. MOA, right? That means that we'll have to claim tax.
Hello. Something's wrong with your audio. Please fix it. No, we can't hear him.
And one more thing before you complete your question, that all the society given has to be get registered in the Trust Act. Now you have to follow the local laws also. It has been clarified that a society registered in the Society Registration Act is also required to register under the Charitable Trust Act of the state, whatever it is. So please, otherwise, what is the implication? Your registration for exemption under Income Tax Act, Section 12AA or 1023C may be withdrawn. Now somebody was talking to me that all right, we will pay the tax. That our income will be taxed and we will give up the registration under 1023C and 12AA. It is not so easy. Once it is explicit that you are engaged in a commercial activity, you are no more charitable, your registration affiliation is liable to be cancelled by the affiliating or recognizing body also. So that is also important.
So what, you have to shut down the school?
The government didn't say so, but it is a final product of the judgment.
Yes, let him just finish, Robin, yes.
So my two questions are, this judgment came under Section 23C, right? Most of us are registered under Section 12. Does it make a difference?
No.
No, okay.
No, why? There is another judgment, Ahmedabad Development Authority, which is dealing with all kind of associations or the societies registered under 12AA.
Okay.
And Section 215, defining the charitable activity, deals with all kind of cases.
All right. My second question is, you're asking us to amend our MOA now, right? Considering the fact the judgment has come out. But if we amend our MOA, that means we'll have to apply for income tax exemption again.
No. You have to seek their permission.
Okay.
You have to seek only their approval on the amendments. And that will generally grant it.
So you suggest that we should do it immediately?
You should do immediately because the Supreme Court has given the maximum period of 3 months or in certain cases for 2 years. So time is running out. Please do it as fast as you can.
So I discussed this, I have friends across Chandigarh Income Tax Department, and right now nobody's clear.
That is why Damodar Goyal is required.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just one more question, last question. Yes, please take the mic to him. Yeah. It's on, sir.
Hello.
Yes.
Good morning, Mr. Goyal. And my question is related to RTE.
Introduce yourself, sir, so we know.
Sorry. Sanjay Abhisheka, Lakshmipad Singhania School, Rajasthan.
Rajasthan.
So my question, as Mr. Goyal have discussed about Supreme Court verdict and many points related to the decision, changes which have taken place. One of the problems we are facing in Rajasthan regarding that verdict of Supreme Court, release of RTE payments. But unfortunately, the verdict was given that all the payments to be cleared by March 2021. As on date, we are still facing in Rajasthan that 3 years have passed and we have not been getting the payments.
Very simple answer, file a contempt petition against the government of Rajasthan.
That is a famous saying, कि बिल्ली के गले में घंटी कौन बांधे? There is a famous saying.
Those who are not getting the payment, they have to
Sir,
get
majority
the
of the schools, majority of the 75% schools, they are not getting the payment.
No. Because there are some reasons, you know it well, I know it well.
Yes.
So the only answer is that if the verdict of the Supreme Court is not being implemented, the answer lies that we have to file a contempt petition.
Sorry.
And believe me, government will never take it otherwise. In the same judgment, Indian school judgment, which you are referring,
Yes.
I have filed a contempt petition against Mr. P.K. Goyal, Additional Chief Secretary, for not issuing the clarification about the composition of the school level fee committee. And P.K. Goyal is still continuing as a good friend of mine. So they are not bothered about the contempt petitions. Please be brave.
So an individual school can file a contempt petition, right?
Any school.
Yeah, you don't have to wait for your association.
Yeah.
You can do it in your own right.
We have association, but I'm sorry to say, speak on front that we got unknown calls, not unknown calls, known calls from the government bodies. don't be smart, we will take care of your finance and budget and all these things. So we sat down.
I did not made admission in class 1 in spite of the direction. I went to the High Court and I got the stay. But if you want that somebody will come and feed you, don't look for others' shoulder. That is the problem with the school walas. We don't come in front to take the bullet on our chest. We are just trying to put somebody in front of others. So please don't do that. Be brave.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Goyal, and thank you, Dilip, so much.
What makes a good institution? There are 4 important words which you must carry in your mind. Number 1 is good governance. Number 2 is good planning. Number 3 is a perfect strategy. And 4th is compliance of law. If you have these 4 things in your organization, you will progress, you will grow, and nobody will ever able to catch you. I am always taking the bullet, I am always fighting, I am pointing a gun on the government. In my last 30 years of life, I have pointed the gun at government for so many times, but still I am doing the same thing at the age of 72.
Thank you.
Thank you.